Hello, everybody, again. Great to be here with all of you. So if you guys want to have any questions by the end, you should take this picture here. We are going to start now with the panel, Slaying Dragons Together, Multidisciplinary Solutions to Security Issues with Stanley Barr, Mary Yang, and Leslie Anderson. Thank you very much. And by the end, if you have any other questions, please take those upstairs at the City View and you can ask them. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So I'm Mary Yang. I'm going to kick off our chat today. It's really going to be a little bit fluid, but we did talking points. So hopefully you guys find this exciting. This is just a little bit of a bio on each of us. I'm not going to read through most of this. I will say that Stan is an incredible MITRE researcher. He'll be talking a little bit about some of the stuff he's done today. And Leslie Anderson is also with the MITRE Corporation, is an incredible strategist, broad thinker, maker of things, and person who gets things to move in places that sometimes don't want to move. I'm Mary Yang. I run marketing for a variety of startups and organizations, and that's kind of our bio for today. We're going to jump into the program agenda slide. We figured we'd give you a little bit of a map of the conversation today. One of the things when we were talking about the work that we've done together is just sort of how isolating and difficult it can sometimes be as a security practitioner. And it can feel like, you know, you're kind of in the trenches by yourself sometimes. But one of the things that Stan has found and that Leslie and I have found is that there's a much broader community and a bigger community, besides being one of them, that really can enable you to think more broadly and leverage that community to solve some of your challenges that you're having. And so that's a little bit about what we wanted to talk about today, and really coming from that perspective of like, how do you break out of moments where it feels like you're in it all by yourself. Okay, so the sort of power of community. Before we dived in, I think we wanted to talk a little bit about the experiences that we've seen in community and how that's been helpful for us. And so, Stan, I was going to have you talk a little bit about, you know, these are some broad benefits, we would say, of community. And you had a couple of thoughts on some specific ones, leveraging community to help with your problems.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing, I think hopefully we're each going to take a little bit one of these things. I think that part of what I found working with community is that you really do need people who have a different viewpoint than you, right, as a technologist. So I think the way we've broken this sort of down is I built some technology in some of these areas, and Mary helped us a lot with our marketing and our market analysis and looking at what we needed to do outside of our corporate environment and how we reach out to other people. And Leslie was our strategist, and Leslie understood, you know, how to speak officer. And as a technologist, you don't always know how to speak executive, right? And we call it officer where I'm from. But it's really like, I have a cool idea, and sometimes I get wrapped around that axle. And so the idea and the power of a multidisciplinary team is that, like, I can have a good idea and Leslie goes, okay, we gotta fix this. We gotta be able to say it this way. We gotta talk about that market need, right? What is it gonna do for them? So I think that for me, you know, the idea of having a multidisciplinary team in ideation and idea generation is sort of like, sometimes I'll have a big idea about a technology or an innovation, but I need some people to help me ground that in what we need to do to actually go to market, or why does anyone care about your idea, right? And that sometimes that's a struggle for us. We have a really cool technology, but we don't know how to apply it. And that's why you need other people to help you connect it to a corporate vision, especially if you're in a company, and not only a corporate vision to get that buy-in, but also just because it's important to you and your company doesn't mean it's important to anyone else. And that's where you need someone who can read a Gartner report and explain to you what is going on in the world. So I think that that's one of the things that I'll just talk about there.
I love that. Leslie?
Sure. So I think I was telling these guys earlier that I'm always going to default to sort of people as the primary driver of all things that we do, people's needs and people's motivations. And so for me, the two elements on the bottom here, improved communication and building trusted relationships, have always been paramount to the power of community. And I don't know how much you know about the MITRE Corporation, but we're a big nonprofit full of technical experts like Stan, and we operate these things called federally funded research and development centers. Because of our status as an operator of these FFRDCs and our nonprofit posture, we don't have much conflict in the community. We're generally trusted by our government sponsors, our government customers, federal agencies mostly, and also by industry to sort of be a good mediator of ideas, sharer of information with no profit motive. And so it's a privilege to work at a place like MITRE because you get to be the connector across all of these communities. And paramount to that is building these trusted relationships with other practitioners inside the community and being able to communicate with clarity and perspective expertise, the perspective of expertise across, in our case, government and industry. And I think that our ability to have those trusted relationships is what allows us to really innovate as part of the community and give back to the community in the way that we have and the way we'll get into in the frameworks we're going to discuss in subsequent slides.
Yeah, so we're going to give you guys a couple of examples of what we're talking about when we say collaborative frameworks and talk a little bit about how they got built, firsthand knowledge from the team here, and then we'll talk a little bit about how you can do it yourself. So the first one up is MITRE ATT&CK. I feel like every security practitioner knows about MITRE ATT&CK, but I think a little bit of the sort of origin story might be helpful. So Leslie, can you tell us a little bit about how it all got started?
I would be happy to. ATT&CK is something that probably everybody in the room and online is familiar with. ATT&CK was one of those very first frameworks that MITRE released into the public domain with the intent of raising the cybersecurity posture of the community. It was created from a need to understand and categorize threats in a systematic way. It was not our intent or the team's intent. I wasn't around at MITRE whenever ATT&CK was created back in 2013, but it actually started at Fort Meade at a project called the Fort Meade Experiment. And the idea was about the team wanted to improve detections of APTs and document the tactics and techniques and get away from just relying on IOCs. And so Blake Strom and team began this project and kind of the light bulb came on, you know, Stan was around at that point. During the research that they were conducting, that this would be actually a really great thing to release to the community. And so at the time, our chief security officer, Gary Gagnon, was very bold in his decision to release the first ATT&CK matrix publicly. And now we have a full knowledge base that is the ATT&CK that you know and love. And in fact, a new version was just released a few days ago. And so I encourage you all to go online and check it out. ATT&CK, as you probably know, is now a community-driven framework. So while MITRE manages and operates ATT&CK, it really is completely dependent on on TTPs that we see in the wild that are reported by you all, analyzed by the ATT&CK team, brought into the knowledge base, and then shared globally. And I think also another point worth noting about ATT&CK before we move on to the next framework is that it really, I think, marked a milestone in MITRE's advocating for threat-informed defense, for this idea that we're going to take a look out at what the intentions and techniques of our adversaries are and plan our defenses accordingly.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything before we move on, Stan?
No, I'll wait till the next slide. Do you have anything you want to add to that one?
So I think maybe the only thing I would add on the attack side is, before it feels for folks who have, just kind of gotten into security in the last 10 years or so, it might feel like attack has been around forever. But the I think the idea to release it is something that was very bold at the time. That's not the kind of stuff that was being shared publicly, right? There might have been IOCs being shared inside a place like the FSISAC or something like that. But for the most part, a lot of that knowledge and information was kept very closed inside of the organizations, inside of businesses that might have been compromised or attacked. A lot of that stuff was just very secret, and so this idea to share it out broadly with the community was very revolutionary at the time.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about MITRE Engage, right? So MITRE Engage here, let me just see if we're on that slide, just making sure that we are. So MITRE Engage actually started from our idea of doing just this. So we started with MITRE in deception. Adam and I were on the team that started doing the first deception research at MITRE. And the goal with it is if for those who have been around for a long time, who here was doing defense in the 2000s? Anyone out here? Like, there you go. Yeah. And I think everyone who was doing defensive work in the aughts and the mid-aughts, there was Patch Tuesday, right? And every time Patch Tuesday came out, we knew that some things were going to be really good and some things were going to be really bad, right? Because the ones that didn't get patched were going to be, we're going to see those the next day. So when we were looking at this, there was no unclassified reporting like now, right? Every time I've been here a couple times, seen a couple talks, even this weekend, where people are like, here's how these attacks unfolded. So for a DIB company, a defense industry-based company like MITRE, we were attacked by nation-state actors. And the only type of intelligence that was available was from the government. It was classified. It wasn't useful to us. It wasn't useful to the defense of the company because, it was sort of like what they had seen. So what we had decided to do was focus it on what we could see at the MITRE Corporation. And my boss came to me and he's like, hey, is there any way we can look inside these encrypted channels? Is there anything way we can see what's going on in the host? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. So we built a whole bunch of tools for being able to look inside of the encrypted communications that were going on. We built tools to do forensic analysis of, what happened on those hosts. And we were suddenly able to understand not only the emails, the spear phishes that came in, but what came next, right? And so a lot of times, the only thing that people in the community would have is maybe the spear phish and whatever vulnerability and whatever was the initial callback. But that didn't give everyone a lot of information about what would happen next, even if just one of those things had changed, right? So by us running malware, we started to understand those TTPs. We started to understand how our actors were operating when they got there. And so we're able to learn so much about that. And so, Engage started out for a number of years being stuff we did and we didn't talk about, right? So attack really came, is not saying that attack came out of all this work, but we fed into things that they used. And there was a lot of other things that came that allowed attack to bloom and flourish and a lot more important things than what I was working on. But, it all came together in this whole thing of MITRE and in this whole enterprise of looking at what was going on. And that was really exciting. And I'll just say that, right, so we spent about 10 years working in silence until we came to RSA, and I think 2018, I think that's was it. And that's when we decided to open this up. And our CEO, our CISO said, I want to open this up. I want to talk about it. I want MITRE to do what they've done with attack in deception and start talking about things. And I'd love to have you guys jump in here. Do you want to jump in?
The only thing I was going to add at this point is that, the timeline as we're presenting it is in order of publication. It is not in order of the work and the research that was being done. A lot of what the team decided to publish around attack came out of the work that was grounded in those early deception operations, right, Stan? And so this Engage matrix came out years after attack, because we started to think about, okay, well, how can we teach organizations to do what we do and to identify the threats that are specific to their own entities. Is that stating that right?
I think that is true. Yeah.
I think the only thing I would add is, so if I'm thinking about this in this multidisciplinary approach, Stan and technical team are in the trenches. They're doing these deception operations. They're capturing all of this information. They're documenting it. They're putting a bit of, I think, structure around what they're seeing, categorizing things so that they understand kind of where things are, what kind of activities might be used. And then one day I got a call from Stan and he was like, hey, you've like talked to a bunch of people in the industry. Do you think anyone would be interested in talking to us about all of this data that we've basically amassed from our deception operations? And I said, sure, there's nothing like reaching out and trying. So I emailed every deception vendor on the market and asked them if they wanted to come to a closed workshop to talk to Stan and get a better understanding of what they're seeing in the market and what they might need and what their customers were seeing or their prospects were seeing from a deception technology perspective. That's what we did at RSA in 2018 in a small little room not far from here. And we had some really good conversations that came out of that. And I think that sort of kicked off a deeper dive and a little bit more of a process in creating what you're seeing above us, which is the actual Engage matrix. And I think we could go on to the next slide maybe around how to build collaborative frameworks, because this, I think, really is something that Leslie can dive into in terms of the sort of strategy piece and the business piece. I basically worked on doing a bunch of that outreach and gathering people together. And then Leslie worked with Stan on a few other pieces. And so this is kind of that, how do you do this yourself? And we'll walk you through that.
Yeah, happy to at least start on the business and strategy piece and then chime in with, as we do. So we've talked a little bit about the impetus of our CISO saying, hey, we really want to make sure that we teach other organizations how to do this. And so we had a business goal that we were driving after. And the first thing you always want to do when you're planning your strategy around any business strategy or technology strategy is to align your cybersecurity goal with your business objectives. And their business objectives are to reduce their risk and protect their IP. And so our CISO thought that it was imperative that they learn how to do this for themselves. It is also important to have the cross-functional collaboration and to build that team from the very beginning. I wasn't there at the time of attack's inception, but I can tell you that it was a much more organic process than we used whenever we were working on Engage. We had learned over time, MITRE had also built out its teams to be much more multidisciplinary, particularly in cybersecurity. And so we were able to connect with each other and leverage each other's skills much more naturally and from the beginning of the process. And the reason I bring that up is because when we were working on Engage, one of the things we did from the very beginning, and this may seem like such a Captain Obvious statement, but we brought in a user experience expert, and we wanted to make the design of Engage to be truly user-centric versus technology-centric or technologist-centric. And we brought her in from the very beginning. She met Stan, she heard all of his crazy ideas, and we started to kind of organize as a team the Engage matrix as you see it today. And she was part of our focus groups that we conducted after our RSA meeting with all of the vendors. I think it's fair to say, I think we have one of our attendees from that very first meeting at RSA in the audience today, and safe to say they thought we were a little crazy to get a bunch of competitors together to tell us what they thought was really important about deception technology. But they did. And again, it gets back to that trusted relationship. And when you start building, the team from the beginning, you get a bunch of different skill sets and different ways of looking at a problem, and you get people who have different motivations in the room, and you build a trusted relationship. You know, the foundation of all of this was that we were going to work together to create something that was going to kind of lift the entire community. It kind of just continues to build on itself. I think the other points I wanted to make about, you know, the intersection of strategy and business in this approach is that you always need to be thinking about your risk from the very beginning. And you want to make sure that what you're building is scalable, adaptable, and adoptable. Again, that comes back for us to making it a user-centric matrix that could go and that could be adopted beyond just the hands-on technologist community. And of course, you want to make sure that you're considering compliance and legal whenever you're planning your strategy and your business and you're thinking about your business objectives. Again, underpinning the trust element was the relationship that our CISO had with our general counsel way back in the beginning, whenever we started conducting deception operations. They had a very long-standing business relationship as MITRE colleagues. And like fundamentally, she trusted him. Some of the things he asked her, the CISO asked the chief legal counsel to do were risky. There was no precedent for an organization conducting operations quite the way he wanted to conduct them. And they came to an agreement about how they were going to approach this deliberately. I forget the word we were using earlier, but deliberately and with an eye on risk, but to not step away from what they thought was going to be a really effective approach to gathering the information that was necessary. So I'll hand it over to Stan. Do you want to talk a little bit about technical aspects, and Mary for marketing?
I'm going to start off with the business leader, and I'm going to just talk a little bit more about our CISO for 1 minute, right? So I'm a technologist, PhD computer science. I do a lot of technology stuff, right? And I didn't know either of my partners here before Gary introduced us, right? And so our CISO, our senior vice president at the company is like, okay, Barr, like you can do technology, but you're not going to be leading this out into the world because no one wants to hear you talk crazy like you always do, right? And so Gary set us up together, right? Gary, our CISO brought us together. And I think this is one of those things that if you're out there and you're in the C-suite, if you're a senior VP, it's on you to create these teams. And when you enable the technical people, and when you enable the marketing people and the strategy people, and you tell them and you teach them how to work together and you build that trust with them, they will have relationships that allow them to do great things, and that those relationships will span and stand the test of time. Like Mary doesn't work at the company anymore, and she left to go off and do bigger and better things. But we look for opportunities to speak together on technical and outreach things, because it was just because of how we were taught to work together. And I think that sometimes it's hard for strategists and marketing people and technology people to work together. But once you get into that relationship and once you put some effort forth in trying to understand other people's positions, all things are possible. And I think that technology is important. And by the way, I'm here on the stage talking about the technology, but it wasn't just me. There are people who made many things that were very profound for this. I'll say I had my part, and there were other people who had many great parts, and it's some that were much more successful than some of my things. I'm just lucky enough to be the technical guy on stage today, so I don't want this to sound like it was just me. There were many great people. I'm not going to name names because I didn't get permission, but there are a lot of great people who did this work too.
I think that sort of just reiterates that power of community. I know how many folks were part of the development of Engage, including a lot of those technologists and like technology vendors out there, and others as well. So I would agree with that.
And I would say that there's somebody in the audience, we won't call him out, but he, when we did our focus groups, right, we went to these people and like, what do you think, right? And they're like, I don't understand what you technology guy is talking about this. I'm a vendor. I need to sell. And we're like, we thought about this because we wanted a framework that where the technologists could use. But we also needed something that allowed the vendors to help them articulate the message, and also something to hold their feet to the fire, right? So MITRE, that's what what we were all about there, was give them something that can show the value, give something that that people can ask, does it do this? Can you do this with it? And that's, both users and the vendor community we were trying to represent.
I actually think that's a great sort of backdrop to this second step, which is around trying to find some of that common ground, right? A lot of, I think, those conversations were happening. That first one was a little bit crazy. I do think everyone thought we were nuts. But afterwards, it was about having the one-on-one conversations, if I'm understanding it correctly, and trying to document that and find some common ground. Can you guys share any anecdotes from sort of the process post that first meeting?
Yeah, so I'll start and I'll let you continue. It was, we'd done a lot of research in this, and there was a lot of things that we had to figure out how all this stuff fit together. Engage. I hope you guys, we didn't actually talk about what the framework is all about, but maybe we'll come back next year. Like, everyone tell us we did a great job and they'll invite us back next year. But the important thing is to, when you have all that documentation in any sort of research program or process, you just dump it out on the table, and then you sort it, and then you try and figure out what makes sense. And as we went and as we did these focused interviews, like, I had no idea what a focus group was because I'm a technology guy. I do science, I do engineering, I make crazy ideas. But, with people like Leslie and Mary, they were saying, okay, if you're going to talk to companies out there, you got to have a structured message. You've got to show them what you're thinking, and you got to be able to willing to take some lumps when they say you're crazy, and help us organize it. And so what we did is we threw all the stuff out on the table. We gave some ideas about how we thought it would fit together and what we thought it would work, and then we talked internally, tried to get something that was at least coherent. And then we went out and one by one, we talked with the deception vendors, every big deception vendor. We said, what do you think about this? And some of them were like, I love this. I don't like that. I'd love you to do some of this. And we looked at that and we said, okay, well, it's really just their one little niche. We'll find a little place for that, but it can't be the big thing, right? So we tried to balance all those things to be true to the vision, but also make it something that other people could use. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, I think, the other example that I have that is a little more distant from MITRE frameworks is that we've also done support for the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at NIST. And it's what Stan's describing has been a tried and true method over time. And so if you're here and you're interested in taking this approach to other challenges that you see coming down the pike, it's worth looking at some of these other communities and processes that have been developed by, not just MITRE, but NIST. At NCCOE, for example, we would take very sector-focused approaches to cybersecurity challenges. We would have large meetings at the beginning of a project and kind of crowdsource. It was a little more formalized than that, but we were more or less crowdsourcing the challenges that organizations were having within an industry, so maybe energy or finance, something like that. And then we would sort of, over time, neck down these groups to be smaller and smaller so that we could get into more detailed discussions and really start to pinpoint what the common ground was that we were all seeing, and be able to identify those problems that were truly community wide. And then the project teams at NCCOE would go off with in collaboration with industry, but also with NIST technologists, computer scientists, et cetera, go and try to tackle these problems in lab builds and then publish the results. And so it's worth looking, if you're interested in doing this, taking on a project like this, spearheading a project like this, I think it's worth looking at resources that MITRE has available online, but also places like NCCOE, where, there is a very kind of a rigorous system that they use for publication. I was actually going to ask Mary a question a little that's a little off script, but as we were talking, MITRE as a nonprofit that operates research and development centers isn't really structured to create products, right? Like we're not profit. We don't have a profit motive. We have a mission focus, and so we're trying to create some kind of impact. And generally, it's in the name of national security. Or economic security. So I'm wondering, we sort of have this way of approaching problems that is a little opportunistic, maybe. I'm not talking out of school, hopefully, when I say that it's a little opportunistic. And we kind of work organically within the organization to identify the right people to work on a problem. So if you're looking for a bunch of different people with a bunch of different skill sets, you kind of reach out to your network and figure that out. But, in a more structured, I think of it as being a more structured commercial environment. How do you see the relationships that are built across these multidisciplinary? Because obviously you're doing it, right? You're following the same recipe. Is it different, I guess, for the perspective of someone who's coming from a commercial organization?
That's a good question.
Sorry to just throw.
No, that's okay.
We just like to, play fast and loose around here.
We do. As evidenced by the way we started. So I think that if I'm kind of thinking through the way that I would approach these things, a lot of it ends up being around the folks that I know I need input on or expertise from, and understanding their motivations and their goals. And I was working for a threat intel company a little while back, I'm in marketing, and the goal is, I was working for a vendor. They did threat intel. The goal was to sell more threat intel, right? It's not rocket science. But the thing that I realized that I was sort of missing was examples of the research that we were able to provide to customers. And it took a little bit of sort of working through, okay, I'm not developing this stuff myself. There are experts on the team who do this. How do I tap into those folks? Who are the right people there that can help with this? What's their objective? What are they being judged by? What does success look like for them? And how do I get that to align with the broader corporate goals? And then let's work together to figure out what does make sense, right? We may not be able to do the kind of deep dive threat intel research that we would give to a customer, but we might be able to produce something interesting enough in the market that would be meaningful, but also, maybe get someone in the door to say, hey, I want to learn more about what this is and how I could buy it. So there is a little bit of that approach.
Thanks.
All right. I think I'm kind of keeping an eye on time. Okay. So next one is developing these models. And Stan, I think you talked a little bit about with Engage, all of the stuff that was gathered over sort of a decade, the conversations that are happening, the focus groups, all of that stuff. You're kind of documenting things out. Walk us through the process of actually kind of putting some structure around Engage and getting it to the state that it's in now.
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of things that went into it, but at one point, we just laid down different things, and we laid down things that we thought that a user, I'll call them a deception operator, would need to think about, and then we put some things down about bad guys, APTs, and what they would think about, and then we started thinking about tools and infrastructure that we would need. And so what happens is the first round of all these sort of frameworks, you wind up with a hodgepodge. Some of it's about how you think about it. Somehow it's about the tools that you're going to use. Some of it is about how other people will see it, either vendors or something else, or adversaries or whatever. And then the big thing about a framework, and this is one of those things you have to figure out, is a single point of view. And that when you think about a framework, it can't be my point of view, your point of view, this other point of view. It has to be consistent. And so we had to sort of like, okay, we can't talk about tools, right? And only tools or my thoughts or the adversary's thought. We had to decide what is it. And we decided to put the defender first. And that is the defender's vision of everything. And so we don't talk about the adversary. We talk about how the defender interacts with the adversary. And that was probably, I think, the hardest thing, is to unify around that one viewpoint, a common viewpoint of the framework. And then once we sort of decided that that was it, we're going to look at it from the defender's point of view and the defender's goals. And that's another piece that we decided to focus on, is we decided to focus on what we could do for goals and then approaches, right? How do we take our goals, and then how do we move down to the objectives, and then how do we move down to approaches? And so we tried to think about it that way. And we had and once we decided that goal, objective, and approaches, then we were able to go on that.
Leslie, do you have anything to add?
I don't think more about developing the model. I think,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Gosh, building your own. I think that this is, I don't know that we're going to dive too much into this, because I think we have a couple more slides that we want to get to. But I do, before I go any further, and I'm going to apologize in advance because I was supposed to do this at the beginning of the talk, but there is, in the next few slides, I need to do a little bit of a trigger warning. There are some potentially sensitive topics around internet-related crimes. And so we want to just give folks the option right now on screen and in this room to opt out. We are not going to judge you. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't say this at the beginning of the talk. Okay.
And I think the main point of building your collab, we've talked about this kind of ad nauseum to this point. I think the main thing here is to recognize that you're building your collaborative ecosystem every day throughout your career with every move you make. And so, what we started years ago when in that room with the vendors continues to this day. And we continue to leverage that community and build it out and build our relationships with each other. And it is the way ultimately you continue to solve problems as a community and an ecosystem.
I love that. Thank you. Okay. Some other collaborative success stories. These are all from MITRE. There's a few up here, but I don't know if you want to talk very briefly about Defend while we're on this slide.
I was going to talk more. I was just going to mention Caldera, right? In some ways, a Caldera is not a framework. Right, it is a tool. So a lot of times MITRE talks about both frameworks and tools, and Caldera is an actual tool. And so this is in this collaboration. Caldera is now an open source thing. It is something that everyone can collaborate on, and we're trying to open it up to share.
Yeah, open it up even further. So one of the interesting things about creating these community-driven frameworks is that they need to be funded somehow. Somebody needs to pay the technologists and the marketers and the strategists to actually keep the thing, to build the thing, launch it, and then keep it going. And it can be a challenge to continue the operations and maintenance of these tools over time, because in most cases, with some exceptions, in most cases, the ones that MITRE works on are in fact funded by MITRE. They're launched through our research and development program, and then we kind of find a way to use MITRE's overhead, indirect funding to keep these things going. So Caldera is one such tool, and we're super proud of it. Right now, Caldera is largely funded through an NSF grant that is all around moving Caldera more completely into becoming a community-managed resource. So if anybody's interested in getting more involved with Caldera and managing it, I would love to talk to you. After the talk today, or we could chat tomorrow sometime during the conference. But we'd really like to get Caldera to a place where MITRE is a manager of its continued development and execution, but we are not necessarily the lead. So we're looking for volunteer managers who would help us launch this experiment. It is a bit of an experiment for MITRE. A lot of the things that we've launched to date that are open source continue to be maintained by MITRE, and we're really trying to break new ground with Caldera and kind of get it out into the community and have it be managed by the community. So It's my Caldera
If
plug.
you are interested,
Yeah.
please
Oh.
see us afterwards, and
Right.
we can get you in touch with whoever's running it now. I think actually maybe you.
Yeah, I'm one of them. So
Okay, so this is the I'm getting the little time warning. So this is not just a cyber only type of approach. There's also some work that Leslie's been doing to build a framework around stopping crimes against children.
yeah, internet-enabled crimes against children. So this particular topic is near and dear to my heart. I am actually not the principal investigator for this work. Her name is Pamela Peterchek, and her name is, and contact information is on the slide if you're interested in learning more. But we are taking a page out of the cybersecurity playbook and applying this to another paradigm, which is taking a threat-informed approach to mitigating crimes, internet-enabled crimes against children. So I won't get into all the details of Pamela's work. It's still fairly early stage, but she has basically taken an open source approach, gathering information from court records, and started to think about how to systematically categorize this kind of adversary attack over time to better educate law enforcement, prosecutors, victim services organizations, families, Health and Human Services, any organization that is dealing with child welfare, about how these exploitations are enabled by technology. And so I wanted to bring it up just as sort of a provocative thought toward the end of the talk, to say it's not just cybersecurity issues that can be managed through a community approach, through an open source approach. It can be things like this as well. And we're also just super proud of this work. And
It's really important.
If you're interested in learning more about that, I'm happy to share a little more after the talk. Or you can always reach out to Pamela, because she is very much in the middle of the research and looking for feedback from across the community, from technology firms, from nonprofit organizations, from policy experts, you name it. She'd love to hear from you.
All right. Okay, we have 2 minutes, guys.
Take a picture of this.
Yeah. Read these books. That's the.
So do you want to talk about one, and then you can talk about one?
Yeah.
Pick one.
So the one I will recommend for technologists is to just get you out of your technology-focused day. It's this book by Rick Rubin, who is a music producer, called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. It's an extraordinary book that encourages you to think about creativity less like a process and more like a way of approaching the world. So whether you download the audiobook or you read this book, highly recommend it. If you're ever stuck in your problem solving day to day, take a few minutes with Rick Rubin, and he'll show you the way. It's a little new agey, but trust me.
All right, Stan.
I'll just say The Martian. I think everyone needs to read science fiction and have creativity. I think the great thing about The Martian is it talks about problem solving. It's a great read. It's a great story. Talks about problem solving, breaking it down, being that guy alone trying to do things. Remember that there are people out there who care about you, and there are people out there who want to help you. So they can't always help you, but you got to reach out. You got to communicate, and keep working, keep striving.
I love it. All right. This is our things that you can do. Stan felt rightly, and I'm so proud that you were like, we need a call to action for folks in the audience. This is our call to action. You guys are all at B-Sides. It's a great community. It's, we're here in San Francisco, but obviously spans the globe. Join your community, reach out to folks, talk to people about some of the challenges you're having, start to build that trust. And then, if you ever have questions along the way, MITRE is definitely here to help with that.
100%.
Yeah. And we just got our 1 minute warning. So I know we were going to take questions. I don't think we have time for questions, but if you do have questions, feel free to come to talk to us after the talk. You can find us all on LinkedIn, and, we're all about the open source collaboration. So, please reach out.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause.
And thank you for sticking around till
Yeah.
last talk. This is awesome.
That's awesome. That's right. Thanks for our wonderful sponsors as well. And we still have the opening remarks. And as they said, if you guys have more questions, they're going to be outside and they can take them there. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay.